Hey there, friend. Imagine sitting across from me by a flickering hearth, the kind that throws long shadows and warm light just right for stories that linger. You might think the Black Death hit like a storm. Sudden, flashy, wiping villages clean in tales of doom and distant kings. But in these rural hollows it crept in quieter, more personal, a shadow lengthening over the fields you knew by heart. Stick around if this pulls you in. Hit that subscribe if you want more whispers from the past, and drop a comment on what surprises you most. Now, dim the lights, let the room cool a touch, and lean in as we step back. Imagine opening your eyes to a dawn that feels too still, the air heavy with something you can't yet name. You wake to a wind that doesn't belong. It whispers through the shutters, carrying a faint, sour tang like leather left too long in rain. Your skin prickles under the rough blanket, cool draft finding the gap at your neck. The familiar creak of the house settles around you, straw shifting, a mouse in the thatch. But outside, the world holds its breath. No rooster cuts the quiet. No cartwheel grinds the lane. You sit up, heart steady but watchful, and push the door open a crack. The yard looks unchanged at first. Dew beads the grass. Smoke curls lazy from the neighbor's chimney. But the wind tugs harder, riffling the hedgerow like fingers searching. You step out, boots sinking into soft earth, and taste the strangeness on your lips. Damp wool and something sharper, metallic, like a storm brewing far off. A neighbor appears at his threshold, cap low, eyes scanning the horizon where the trade road bends. He lifts a hand, brief, then pulls back, as if the air between you thickened overnight. You follow his gaze. The path to the mill looks empty, but a cart sits crooked by the stile, wheel half buried, harness dangling like forgotten rope. No shout from the driver. No lowing from the team. Your chest tightens, not with fear yet, but curiosity edged sharp. You walk closer, wind pushing at your back, and see the first sign. A satchel spilled open, apples bruised and rolling into grass, a cloak snagged on thorn like it tried to stay. The neighbor mirrors your steps from his side of the hedge, face drawn, hand hovering near his knife. Birds wheel higher than usual, their cries thin and urgent. You kneel by the cart, fingers brushing the damp cloth, cold, too cold for morning, and pull back when a shadow shifts in the underbrush. Not a man. A fox, eyes bright, vanishing quick. Your breath comes even, but the wind carries a murmur now, like voices too far to catch. The neighbor nods once, points to the road, and you both retreat, unspoken agreement hanging in the space you keep. Back at your door you bar it softly, the wood familiar under your palm. The wind dies as suddenly as it rose, leaving a chill that seeps into bone. You stand there, listening to the silence that wasn't silence before, feeling the change settle like dew you can't wipe away. In that first uneasy hush, you sense what's coming. Not a roar, but a tide that will reshape everything. Sometimes survival starts with noticing the quiet, the empty cart, the wind that whispers before it howls, and choosing to step careful into what the day hides. Hey there, settle in with me by this imagined fireside, where the flames crackle low and the shadows dance like old secrets. You might picture the Black Death bursting in like a thunderclap, plague carts rolling dramatic through grand cities, bells tolling doom from afar. But in these tucked-away villages it started softer, a creeping unease in the everyday, like a chill wind finding cracks you never noticed. If this draws you deeper, subscribe for more quiet truths from history, and comment below what piece of the past keeps you up. Now, let the room dim, feel the subtle draft of an early spring morning against your skin, and picture this. You wake to a stillness that's not quite right, opening your eyes to fields that whisper without promise. You stir under the wool, the faint must of damp thatch filling your nose, and the air tastes flat, like bread left a day too long. Your fingers brush the chill stone of the wall as you rise, cool and unyielding, seeping through your sleeve. Outside, the yard feels heavier, the dew clinging longer to grass, as if the ground forgot how to shake it off. You step into it, boots pressing soft earth that gives too easily, and the wind carries a low rustle from the fields, heads nodding, but without the steady hum of hands at work. You walk the furrow you plowed last fall, now overgrown with stubborn weeds that snag your hem. The air smells of turned soil, rich and waiting, but undercut with something off. A faint, sour rot where seed should sprout. Your neighbor appears at his gate, cap pulled low, eyes scanning the horizon where the trade cart usually rattles by noon. He pauses, hand resting on the post, then turns away slow, as if the view carried a weight he couldn't share. You both move toward the common, steps measured, the silence between you widening like a shadow at midday. At the edge of the fallow plot, the unease settles. Stalks lean crooked, promising harvest, but delivering thin promises. Blight speckling leaves, birds picking at empty husks. You kneel, fingers sifting dirt that's loamy but lifeless, cool clods crumbling without the spring you expect. A woman from the next stead joins at a distance, hoe balanced on her shoulder, face drawn as she tests the soil with her toe. No exchange beyond a nod, but her gaze lingers on the sky, where clouds gather without rain's mercy. The wind picks up, whispering through the dry stems, and you feel it in your chest, a quiet warning that the land, like the village, holds back. You stand, brush earth from your knees, and head home, the path feeling longer underfoot. In that subtle shift, before the shadow falls full, you glimpse what's building. Not a storm, but a slow unraveling. Sometimes holding on means feeling the ground change first, tending what yields despite the whispers, and trusting your hands to find the rhythm again. Hey, come sit with me here in the soft glow of lantern light, where the shadows stretch long and the air feels thick with untold stories. You might think the Black Death announced itself with fanfare, riders galloping in with dire warnings, crowds scattering in panic from some obvious harbinger. But in these quiet villages, it slipped in like morning fog, subtle, starting with a cough here, a weary glance there, building unease before anyone named it. That's the twist that history hides. Not thunder, but a whisper that grew. If this hooks you, subscribe for more hidden layers of the past, and comment what part of history you'd want to relive. Curious minds like yours keep these tales alive. Now, hush the room, let the mood turn watchful and dim, with a faint chill like dew on early grass, and imagine opening your eyes to a market day that feels off, the crowd humming just a little too low. You push through the square, the crush of bodies closer than comfort allows, and the air tastes stale, sweat and wool, undercut by a faint, dry rasp that lingers on your tongue. Your elbow brushes a sleeve, rough and damp, sending a prickle up your arm. Voices rise and fall around you, bartering for onions and salt, but something snags, a cough, sharp and hollow, cutting through the murmur like a stick snapped underfoot. It comes from a trader at the edge, his face flushed, hand pressed to his mouth as if to trap the sound. You step aside, basket light on your arm, and watch him haggle with a farmer. The man's shoulders hitch again, the cough pulling deeper this time, leaving him bent. Eyes flick toward him, quick, uneasy, then away, as if looking too long might catch whatever stirs in his chest. A woman nearby adjusts her shawl higher, her gaze sliding to the road where newcomers trickle in, cloaks dusty from travel. No one moves closer. No one pulls away obvious. The square holds its breath in the spaces between elbows. You weave toward the baker's stall, coins cool in your palm, but the rasp follows, echoed now by a child in a mother's arms, her hand rubbing the small back in slow circles. The bread you break tastes of yeast and faint ash, but your swallow sticks. The trader straightens, wipes his brow, and meets your eye for a beat, tired, not afraid, before turning to his wares. You nod once and keep moving, the crowd pressing gentle but insistent, the coughs weaving through like threads in cloth you can't see. Back at the lane's mouth, you pause, basket heavier now, and feel the square's hum shift, a subtle tightening. The wind picks up, carrying the dry edge farther, and you bar your door a touch firmer than before. In that first nagging echo, you sense the change rooting, not in shouts or signs, but in the body's quiet betrayal. Sometimes holding the line means listening to the rasp before it names itself, feeling the crowd pull inward, and choosing distance as the first act of care. Sweat beads cold on your forehead as you kneel by the bed, the air thick with the sour tang of unwashed linen and the sharp bite of boiled nettle. Your fingers hover over the cloth, trembling a touch, before you wring it out in the basin. Water drips heavy, splashing the rushes that crunch under your knees. The room feels smaller, the walls pressing in with the low groan from the figure beneath the blanket, a sound that pulls at your gut, deep and ragged, like roots tearing free. You lay the cloth across the brow, damp and insistent, and watch it steam faintly in the hearthlight. The face turns, eyes glassy and distant, hand twitching as if chasing a fly that isn't there. Your own skin prickles, a flush rising unbidden, and you step back to the table, palms flat on the wood to steady the spin. The fire spits, low and reluctant, casting long shadows that dance like figures waiting to cross the room. You taste salt when you swallow, the broth you stirred earlier gone flat in the pot. Outside, the lane carries echoes. Another cough, muffled through timber, then a door bar dropping with a thud that travels. You press your ear to the crack in the shutter and see movement. A neighbor at her window, face pale, hand clutching a kerchief to her mouth, eyes scanning for the miller's boy who hasn't shown. No one gathers. Feet shuffle, retreat, the space between houses widening like a wound. The elder passes slow, staff tapping earth, his gaze lifting to your sill, where you left a bundle wrapped in cloth, herbs and a rag, untouched yet. You return to the bed, adjust the blanket with care, fingers brushing a wrist that's fever hot, pulse fluttering under skin too thin. Your chest tightens, breath shallow as you mix more nettle, the leaves wilting in the pot with a soft hiss. The room swims a little, the shadows lengthening, and you grip the table edge until your knuckles whiten. A draft slips under the door, cool and warning, carrying the faint whinny of a horse left too long in the stable. Night falls heavier. You bank the coals, the orange glow fading to gray, and sit in the corner, watching the rise and fall of the blanket. The cough returns, pulling you forward again, the cycle unbroken. Your hands ache from wringing, but you do it once more, the water colder now. In the dim watch of that hearth, you feel the fever's shadows spread, not just in flesh, but in the quiet panic of what it takes. Sometimes endurance is the steady press of a cloth, the refusal to turn away from heat that burns, and the knowledge that holding on, one damp fold at a time, keeps the light from going all the way out. The rot hits you first, a heavy sweetness gone wrong, like apples fallen too long in rain. It clings to the wind that rustles the stalks, low and relentless, turning heads to mush before they've ripened. Your boots sink into mud that's turned clay thick, cold seeping through leather to numb your toes. You kneel, fingers brushing a stem that's soft at the joint, splitting easy under pressure, spilling a pale ooze that stains your skin. The taste comes unasked. Bitter sap on your lips when you wipe sweat, a promise of bread turned to regret. You stand and survey the field, the once straight rows now a tangle of leaners and breakers. Wheat bows under its own weight, kernels loose and graying at the base. Barley rustles in a dry, mocking chorus, empty husks rattling like bones in a sack. Your sickle hangs heavy at your belt, blade dulled by disuse, and you draw it slow, testing the air with a single swing. The cut sheaf falls limp, not golden, not full. You bind it with straw, hands moving mechanical, the tie loose where fingers ache from cold. Across the furrow, a figure works in a patch of his own, back bent, scythe rising and falling at half speed. He pauses, straightens, eyes meeting yours over the heads, tired, questioning, before dropping back to the earth. No call crosses the space. A woman appears at the hedge, basket on arm, her gaze sweeping the breadth with a hand pressed to her mouth, as if the sight alone could sour her inside. She kneels farther off, pulling what she can, movements careful, deliberate, leaving gaps where the rot has won. You harvest what yields, sheaf by sheaf, stacking them small and far apart to dry without crowding. The wind pushes harder, carrying the scent farther, into the lane where a child stops his play, nose wrinkling, small shoulders hunching, as if the smell weighed there too. The elder moves along the boundary, staff tapping slow, his free hand trailing the air above the crop, as if blessing or measuring loss. No one gathers to share the burden. Each claims a strip and works it alone, the field a patchwork of effort amid surrender. By midday your back protests the bend, arms heavy with what you've saved. The unclaimed stretches mock with their swell, bounty bloating to waste. You shoulder a bundle and trudge to the barn, the load light but the emptiness vast. In the quiet scream of that untended gold, you feel the harvest's silent judgment. Not blame, but a call to weigh what remains. Sometimes resilience is the hand that cuts what it can, binds what it must, and walks away from abundance turned poison, knowing the earth will ask again tomorrow, and your answer must be ready. Your stomach pulls tight as you stir the pot, the wooden spoon scraping thin broth that smells of bone and faded onion. The liquid clings, barely thickening, and you taste the lack on your tongue, flat, empty, a hunger that sits heavy in your ribs. The fire snaps low, coals dim under ash, and the chill from the stone floor climbs your bare feet, numbing toes already thin from months of lean. You ladle a cup and sip, the warmth fleeting, leaving the gnaw sharper. You carry the cup to the threshold, where the lane waits in early light. A neighbor appears at her door, bowl in hand, her eyes hollow under the kerchief. She sets the bowl on the sill and steps back, gaze dropping to the ground, as if the space between you might swallow what little she offers. You nod, once, and leave your own measure there, the exchange a silent pact amid the quiet that has fallen over meals. No one gathers at tables anymore. Doors stay shut, and hunger echoes in the spaces where laughter used to fill. You walk to the common, basket light on your arm, and see the field's ruin up close. Stooks leaning like tired sentinels, kernels scattered for birds that circle low. Your hand presses your belly, feeling the hollow shift. A man from the next stead hoes a patch of turnips, his movements slow, deliberate, earth-yielding sparse roots that he drops into a sack with a soft thud. He glances up, face gaunt, shoulders rounded, and turns away quick, as if sharing the sight made the emptiness grow. At the edge of the wood, you forage, roots twisted from cold soil, their bite sharp and unripe on your tongue when you test one. Nettles sting through gloves, but you gather them anyway, the burn a reminder of what feeds. A woman passes with a snare in hand, her eyes scanning the underbrush, posture tense, hand lingering near her knife. No exchange beyond the brief lift of chins, but you both know the fear. Plague takes the strong first, hunger takes the rest. Back home, you boil the roots with the last salt, the steam barely rising, and portion it into bowls for the sill. The gnaw doesn't ease. It settles deeper, a companion to the coughs that thread the lane at night. In the steady hollow of that want, you feel two shadows walking beside the sickness. Not just death, but the slow starvation that tests the will. Sometimes strength is the hand that rations the bitter, the step that forages without complaint, and the quiet resolve to divide what little remains, knowing the body learns to live on echoes until the ground gives again. Bitter steam rises first, wormwood and rue twisting sharp in your nose, undercut by the sour reek of fever sweat soaked into straw. Your fingers ache from grinding pestle to mortar, the stone cool and unyielding under callus, bruising leaves until their oils weep green. You taste the bite when you wipe your mouth. Acrid, insistent, a warning the body won't forget. The fire hisses low in the grate, coals popping like small judgments, and the room holds a weight. Air thick, heavy, as if the walls breathed it back. You tip the paste into the pot, watching it swirl with hot water, the brew darkening to mud. Hands arrive at the threshold, trembling, cloth-wrapped, offering bundles of garlic and yarrow snatched from the edge of woods. A woman steps close as she can, eyes red-rimmed, her gaze fixed on the floor as she unhooks the sack from her belt and sets it down. You nod, once, and she retreats, shoulders hunched, the space behind her echoing with the cough she carries. No one lingers. The fear smells of it, salt and bile clinging to wool, turning every breath a little shorter. You stir clockwise, 3 turns, as your grandmother taught, the spoon scraping iron. The first cup fills slow, steam curling like a prayer unanswered. You carry it to the sill, wrapped in linen to keep the heat, and place it where a pole can hook it later. A man appears at dusk, face shadowed, his hand lifting the vessel without looking up, the chain rattling soft as he pulls it inside a house you know too well. You see his wife at the window, face drawn, fingers twisting a rag until it's white. Night deepens. You refill the pot, adding willow bark that softens the edge, honey scant from last year's comb to ease the swallow. The brew simmers, bubbling bitter, and you test it yourself. Hot, foul, burning down your throat like truth you can't refuse. Outside, coughs thread the lane like distant dogs, pulling you to the door. The elder passes, staff tapping measured, his eyes meeting yours in a glance that shares the load. Remedies for bodies that fight, but fear for those that won't. You keep the fire fed through the dark, the steam a veil between you and the night. Hands come and go, bundles left and taken, the air growing thicker with herb and dread. In that endless stir and wait, you feel the healer's call, not salvation, but stubborn tending. Sometimes holding life means brewing what repels, offering cups through the distance of fear, and trusting the bitter to buy one more breath, one more dawn. The weight presses first, not in your arms, but in your chest. A dull throb as you stand at the threshold, the air thick with fever's sour milk, and the faint, acrid tang of vinegar cloth drying on the sill. Your fingers ache from hours folding linen, cool and stiff against skin that's raw from constant wringing. The pot simmers behind you, a low bubble like distant thunder, but the sound that lingers is the ragged pull of breath from the house across the lane, where a curtain twitches without a hand. You step out, basket heavy with poultices wrapped tight, and the ground feels uneven underfoot, stones shifted by feet, too weak to lift. A woman meets your gaze from her door, eyes sunken, hand clutching a child's shoulder, small, hot, the fever already marking her. She shakes her head once, slow, and turns away, the door bar dropping with a finality that echoes in your ribs. You leave the basket at the rope's end, pole extended so she can hook it without crossing, and watch her shadow pull it in, quick and desperate. Further down, the elder waits, staff planted, his face lined deeper than yesterday, gaze fixed on the miller's stead where smoke no longer rises. He nods, brief, and you both move on, the lane a path of thresholds marked by silence and half-drawn shutters. At each, the same. A face appears, pale and drawn, fingers beckoning, then retreating, eyes pleading for what your hands carry but knowing the cost. You set down garlic bulbs, tied-in cloth, and honey from the last hive, scarce, precious, and back away, the fear in their stares heavier than the load. By noon your shoulders burn. You pause at a low wall, press your palm to cool stone, feeling the chill seep in like mercy. A boy slips from a hedge, eyes wide, offering a fist of wild greens snatched from the edge, wilted, earnest, and you take them, pressing a rag into his palm in return. He vanishes quick, the exchange a spark in the growing dark. The healer's burden is this: seeing the flame dim in eyes you know, offering what might buy a breath while the world narrows to doors and distance. Twilight falls, and you return heavy, poultices gone, hands empty but bruised. The pot waits, empty too, and you fill it again, the water cold against your skin. In the quiet crush of that witnessing, you feel the true agony, not just the failing bodies, but the hearts that watch without touch. Sometimes endurance is the healer's silent vow, to carry the grief of many in one pair of hands, to offer from scarcity without falter, and to hold the line between life and loss, knowing your own breath is the next one counted. Hey, lean in close like we're sharing this by a low-burning candle, the flames steady but shadows long and watchful. You might think isolation and the plague was just locked doors and lone figures, the stuff of dramatic quarantines in crowded towns, but in these rural lanes, it built like a wall of its own, slow from the inside, with cries echoing where voices used to blend. The twist? It wasn't just fear of the sick. It was the ache of hearing life fray behind timber you couldn't cross. If this stirs you, subscribe for more glimpses into that raw human edge, and comment what silence in history haunts you most. Now let the mood settle heavy, the air cool and still, like dusk after storm, and imagine opening your eyes to a morning where the world shrinks to your own four walls, the quiet, too complete. You wake to a silence broken only by the faint creak of settling beams. The air tastes stale, wool and unwashed linen, and your skin chills where the blanket gaps, the room holding last night's fire smoke like a reluctant breath. You rise, feet finding the cold rushes that scratch your soles, and move to the shutter. Outside, the lane lies empty. No children chasing, no cart creak, no low talk at the well. Your hand lingers on the bar you dropped at dawn, heavy wood cool under palm, and the weight of it settles deeper. A sound pulls you, soft, muffled, a child's wail threading through the wall from the weaver's house. It rises and falls, ragged, answered by a low murmur that breaks into sob. Your chest tightens, breath shallow, and you press your ear to the timber, feeling the vibration hum through your jaw. No footsteps outside. No one crosses to help. The cry sharpens, then hushes, leaving the quiet thicker, pressing like a hand on your throat. You step back, fingers tracing the door's seam, the iron latch cold and unyielding. From another stead, a cough racks the air, wet, insistent, followed by the scrape of a bar locking tight. Shadows move behind oiled panes. A figure pacing, hand to mouth, eyes darting to the road where dust settles without travelers. No one waves. Gestures replace gatherings. A cloth bundle, left at a sill, drawn back by a pole. A nod through a crack that says enough without words. The lane becomes a row of tombs standing, each house a world unto itself, cries rising like smoke you can't chase. You bar your own door firmer, the thud echoing your pulse. In that walled hush where sorrow leaks through cracks, you feel the fear's true shape. Not the street's chaos, but the isolation that turns home to cage. Sometimes survival is this: listening to the unseen agony, choosing the bar over the bridge, and holding your breath with the village, hoping the silence ends before it swallows all. A chill crawls up your spine before you name it, the air in the room gone thick and stale, tasting of old sweat and the faint, metallic edge of fear. Your fingers brush the latch, cool iron biting into palm, and you hesitate, heart thudding uneven. The neighbor's knock came earlier, insistent 3 times, now silenced, leaving only the wind's low moan through cracks, rattling shutters like loose teeth. You step back, breath shallow, and press your ear to the wall. A cough hacks through, wet and close, followed by a shuffle that stops too abrupt. You pace the narrow space, boots scuffing rushes that no longer feel safe underfoot, the fibers prickling like warnings. Trust used to mean crossing a threshold without thought, a hand extended for salt, a shared glance over the hedge. Now every surface gleams suspect. The table you wiped with vinegar, the cup you drank from, the sleeve you touched to your brow. Your skin itches where air brushed it, a phantom heat rising in your neck, and you scratch until it stings, doubt blooming like a bruise. Outside, shadows move cautious. A figure darts from door to door, bundle in arms, cloth wrapped tight around hands and face, eyes darting like a fox in daylight. She pauses at a sill, unhooks something on a pole, and flees, the space behind her empty and echoing. No one calls greeting. A child peers from a window, face pressed to glass, then vanishes quick when you turn, the mother's shadow pulling her in. The lane, once alive with steps and murmurs, now holds its ground with suspicion, every footfall a potential thief of breath. You bar the door again, the wood groaning under your weight, and feel the room close tighter. Trust unravels in these hours, not with a shout, but a flinch, a glance averted, a hand withdrawn before it reaches. You light a stub of candle, flame guttering in the draft, and watch it dance, imagining the invisible threads breaking one by one. The cough from next door pulls again, and you step farther, heart racing at the nearness, the chance that your air mingles with theirs. In that creeping frost of doubt, where every shadow hints at hidden threat, you feel the terror's true bite, not the body's fever, but the mind's slow freeze. Sometimes survival hinges on this chill, learning to question the familiar, to guard against the unseen in those you love, and to hold your ground alone until trust can thaw again. The earth yields grudgingly as you kneel, fingers sinking into cold loam, pulling roots that twist free with a soft snap. They come up gritty, burdock pale and stubby, dandelion forking deep, their skins rough against your palms. The taste hits when you brush dirt from one and bite tentative. Bitter earth, fibrous chew, a faint sweetness masked by the chill. Your mouth fills with the scrape of soil, and you spit, wiping lips on your sleeve that carries the same faint tang. You gather more, basket filling slow with what the wood offers, sorrel leaves wilting in your grip, nettle tops bundled careful to avoid the sting, a few acorns hard as regret. The air smells damp and green, undercut by the rot of last fall's leaves, and wind whispers through bare branches like a half-forgotten song. Your back aches from the bend, knees numb on frozen ground, but you keep on, eyes scanning for the hidden, fiddleheads curling under fern, wild garlic's sharp breath rising from the hollow. Back at the cottage, you wash them in a basin of spring water, cold shocking your wrists, turning brown to clean. The pot waits on the hook, empty as promise, and you chop rough, knife-thudding dull against board. No feast spreads here, no roast fowl, no loaves breaking warm, no ale foaming in mugs passed hand to hand. The absence sits heavy, a ghost at the table where chairs lean empty. You boil the roots slow, steam rising thin, the broth cloudy and sparse. A neighbor appears at the sill, face drawn, basket light in her arms. She sets it down, eyes meeting yours brief, tired, knowing, before stepping back, the space between you a careful measure. You nod, add her dull seaweed to the pot, the salt bite deepening the mix. No words cross. A child peers from her doorway, small hand clutching the frame, gaze on the steaming pot before vanishing inside. The elder passes later, staff tapping measured, his eyes lingering on your fire as if measuring fuel against days. He leaves a twist of dried fish on the step and goes, shoulders straight against the weight. The broth simmers to done, ladled into bowls that sit cooling on the plank. You eat alone, spoon-scraping wood, each swallow a lesson in want. The fiber sticking, the warmth fleeting, hunger's echo louder than before. In that simple boil and quiet share, you taste the true scarcity, not just empty bowls, but the feasts of faces and talk turned to memory. Sometimes, resilience is foraging the bitter, cooking what yields, and dividing the thin warmth, understanding that absence forges the bond stronger than plenty ever could. Your hand trembles on the latch, the iron cold and slick with morning dew as the knock echoes again, insistent, from the neighbor's door where the boy coughs without cease. The air tastes of damp wood and the faint, acrid bite of smoke from a hearth that's gone cold. You step back, heart pounding steady but loud, and watch the shadow shift outside, a figure pressing close, then retreating, hand outstretched for the bundle you promised but now clutched to your chest. The cloth feels heavy, loaves wrapped tight, the last from a meager bake that could feed 3 or 1. You bar the door, the bolt sliding home with a finality that twists your gut. Inside, the child's eyes meet yours, fever bright, pleading, and you turn away, rationing the space between comfort and risk. The boy in the next house needs it more. His mother waits with hands empty as yours once were. But crossing means breath mingling, a touch that could carry death home. Your fingers dig into the bundle, crumbs crumbling under nails bitten raw from nights of this choice. The lane outside hums with the same fracture. A woman drags a cart past, eyes down, wheel creaking over ruts, avoiding the gaze of an old friend at her window who reaches, then withdraws, the gap widening like a chasm. No shared load. No help across thresholds. Desperation carves new lines. A father sealing his own kin behind a nailed plank, hammer strikes ringing out like accusations. A sibling leaving broth on a sill, turning away when the taker emerges, pale and unchanged. You see it in the elder's stoop as he passes, staff tapping hesitant, his nod to you brief, burdened, as if the weight of every refused door settled on his shoulders too. You portion the loaves, one for the child here, the rest hooked on a pole to slide under the neighbor's gap. The child's sob pulls you back, small hands clutching your hem, and you kneel, pressing a scrap to her palm, feeling the bond strain thin as thread. The measure is desperate, moral edges blurring in the haze of survival. Save the near or the far, feed the blood or the bond, hold close or push away. In the quiet fracture of that choice, you feel the terror of bonds bending, not breaking with force, but fraying under the pull of what must be. Sometimes endurance demands this, weighing love against life, choosing the distant cry over the hand in yours, and carrying the scar of isolation as the price of tomorrow. Hey, pull up a chair by this imagined fire, where the embers glow faint and the chill seeps in from the edges, perfect for tales that weigh heavy. You might think the Black Death's toll meant grand pyres or hurried mass burials, dramatic scenes of crowds mourning in unison. But in these rural nooks, death came personal, solitary, the endless dig of one shovel after another, graves hewn by hands too few for the task. The twist lies in the quiet horror, not spectacle, but the intimacy of earth-claiming kin while the living watched from afar. If this grips you, subscribe for more unvarnished glimpses into survival's grit, and comment what loss from the past echoes in your life. Now, let the room cool, the air turn damp like fresh dug soil, and imagine opening your eyes to a gray dawn, the weight of a spade already in your grip. The stench finds you before the light does, rotting flesh and wet earth, sharp as vinegar left to turn, clinging to your throat like a hand. Your palms blister raw on the handle, wood rough and sweat slick, as the blade bites soil, turning black clods that chill your forearms. Dawn breaks slow over the hill, casting long shadows across the mound you started at midnight, the air heavy with frost that numbs your knuckles. Each lift pulls heavier, muscles burning, dirt caking nails until your skin cracks and stings. You pause, breath ragged, and see the bundle waiting at the field's edge, linen wrapped tight, lowered by rope from the cart where no one rides close. A figure stands distant, face shadowed under hood, hand trembling as it unhooks the line and steps back, eyes averted from the hole. No procession follows, no chant rises. The elder waits at the tree line, staff planted deep, his gaze steady but sorrow-lined, nodding once as you resume the dig. The shovel rings dull against stone, then softens to mud, the pit widening inch by reluctant inch. Sweat mixes with grime, trickling cold down your back, and the smell sharpens, decay blooming as you near the task's heart. You lower the body gentle, cloth heavy with final weight, and cover it slow, soil falling like reluctant rain. Hands from afar sprinkle rosemary. The greens snap faint against the rot. No touch crosses the furrow. The grave seals, mound rising humble, and you lean on the spade, chest heaving, the silence vast as the sky above. In the earth's unyielding hold, where every thrust honors the lost without fanfare, you feel death's quiet demand, not spectacle, but labor that breaks the body to spare the soul. Sometimes survival carves this way, digging alone under watchful eyes, burying what love can't save, and rising with soil-stained hands to face the next dawn unbroken. The linen whisper against your hands feels too light, too final. As you fold the shroud one last time, the fabric cool and starched with vinegar's bite. The air holds death's breath, faint rot under the herbs you crushed, rosemary's piney snap mingling with the earthy damp of fresh soil. Your fingers tremble at the edge, tracing the hem where stitches run even, a quiet labor done by lone hands. No song rises from the village, no candle circle warms the night. You carry the wrapped form on a plank to the field's edge, the weight uneven, pulling at your shoulders, wood creaking soft under strain. The mound waits, simple and raw, earth piled loose from the dig. No procession trails you. Figures stand distant, shadows at thresholds and hedgerows, heads bowed but not crossing the furrow. The elder lingers farthest, staff a dark line against dusk, his gaze heavy as yours, hands clasped low. You lower the plank slow, body bending with the care of rituals stripped bare, no priest's chant, no garland of wheat, or farewell cup passed in circle. The shroud settles into the pit, folds undisturbed, and you pause, palm hovering above, feeling the cold rise from below like a sigh. A sprig of yew drops from your sleeve, tossed, gentle, landing light as a promise unspoken. Soil follows, handful by handful, each clod thudding hollow, the mound growing to cover what was known. Wind stirs the grass around the grave, low and mournful, carrying no echoes of bells or hymns. A woman at the lane's bend lifts a kerchief to her face, eyes glistening, then turns away, steps retreating into twilight. No one approaches to scatter offerings or mark the stone. The farewell ends there, hushed, the weight settling not in words or rites, but in the silence that binds the living to the lost. You straighten, back aching deep, and linger until shadows lengthen, the mound blending with the earth it claims. The village holds vigil apart, each door a separate grief. Traditions yielded to the unseen threat. In that stripped rite, where custom bends to necessity, you feel loss's true measure, not in clamor or crowd, but in the quiet yield of hands alone. Sometimes remembrance is this: folding the shroud without song, covering without touch, and carrying the farewell in your step, a reverence born of what you cannot share, enduring because the weight teaches you to walk steadier. The cold floor bites your toes as you slide from the pallet, the rushes prickling like tiny thorns underfoot. Your fingers curl around the door crack, peeking out where Ma's voice used to call neighbors near. The air tastes dusty, like forgotten apples in the loft, and the house holds a hush that's too big, swallowing the creak of your steps. You press closer, breath fogging the wood, and see the lane, empty, the way it was yesterday, with doors shut tight, like sleeping eyes. You slip out anyway, the grass wet and icy against your ankles, dew soaking your hem. The world feels wider but smaller, hedges leaning in like they're listening. Where the boys used to chase hoops, now only wind rolls a leaf, lonely. You pick up a stick, drag it along the fence, the scrape loud in the quiet, and pretend it's a sword fighting ghosts. Pale shapes you imagine hiding behind shutters, whispering why no one plays. Your heart thumps funny, a mix of game and gone, as you crouch by the well, peering down where water mirrors your face, upside down and small. A shadow moves at old widow's door, quick, a hand sliding a bundle on the sill, then gone like smoke. You watch, holding breath, wondering if it's a ghost leaving gifts or Ma's friend from last market, her laugh turned to cough. No one calls you back. Pause at the field, hoe in hand but alone, back bent away from you. You run to the oak tree, climb low branches that scratch your palms, and from up there, the village looks like a drawing half erased. Roofs empty, smoke thin from chimneys that don't talk. The sun climbs slow, warming your cheeks, but the quiet sticks like mud to your shoes. You drop berries into your pocket, tart juice staining fingers, and head home, the stick dragging a line no one will follow. Inside, Ma stirs the pot, eyes tired, and you show her the berries, small offering in your fist. She nods, pulls you close without a word, the warmth chasing the chill a little. In that game's edge, where pretend meets the vanished, you feel the world's quiet shrink. Sometimes growing means playing alone with shadows, picking what the ghosts leave and holding tight to the berries in your hand. Learning resilience tastes sharp and small, but enough to fill the day. The chill seeps through your thin shift as you sit by the hearth, fingers tracing patterns in the ash, patterns that used to be games, horses and rivers, now just lines that go nowhere. The fire's low, coals popping faint, and the air tastes of smoke, and the bitter after of nettle tea Ma brews to keep your cough at bay. Your hands remember the warmth of her palm, but it's smaller now. Fewer around the table, the space echoing where laughter filled it. You slip out at dawn, the yard mud-slick underfoot, cold kissing your calves as you chase the hen that wanders loose. Feathers scatter, white against gray earth, and you gather them slow, tucking one behind your ear like she taught you. The coop stands empty of the plump ones from last spring, gone to pots when mouths grew thin, and your chest tightens, a quiet ache where play used to live. No chasing with the boys down the lane. Doors stay shut, and the silence presses like a hand on your shoulder. At the wood's edge you gather sticks for kindling, bark rough on your palms, splinters pricking deep. A neighbor's boy appears, distant, his eyes wide but careful, stopping at the hedge's bend. He holds out a twisted root, offering without nearness, and you take it, fingers brushing air between. His face twists, grief quick as a cloud, before he turns, running back, small figure vanishing into shadow. You clutch the root, feeling the scar it leaves, like the ones inside where Da's voice used to call you home. Back inside, you stoke the fire, embers glowing red under your breath, and watch Ma mend a shirt too big now, her stitches even but eyes distant. Your hand strays to your chest, where the ache sits, not sharp but constant, the world's edges gone soft and strange. Toys lie forgotten in the corner, wooden horse chipped from falls no one catches. You pick it up, run a thumb over the mane, and set it down gentler. The day unfolds in small tasks, stirring broth that's more water than meat, sweeping rushes that crunch hollow. Night brings dreams of hands reaching, then pulling away, and you wake with the scar pulling tighter. In that silent carry of what's gone, you feel innocence's quiet fade, not stolen in a rush, but worn thin by empty spaces and careful steps. Sometimes growing means bearing the hidden marks, tending the fire with hands that remember touch, and walking the lane alone, resilient, because the ache teaches you depth where play once was. Hey, gather close by this imagined altar, where candle flames flicker steady against stone walls, the scent of ancient smoke hanging like a veil between us. You might think faith in the Black Death's shadow meant unyielding piety, villagers flooding churches in fervent masses, priests leading grand pleas for divine mercy. But in these rural chapels, it twisted quieter, more personal. a sanctuary laced with doubt, where prayers rose not just to heaven, but to question why silence answered back. The reality hits harder. Refuge became crucible, incense masking the fear of unanswered cries. If this stirs the soul, subscribe for more intimate dives into history's heart, and comment what faith's test means to you. Now hush the world. Let the mood deepen with the chill of vaulted shadows and faint echoes of chant, and imagine opening your eyes to a dim nave, the weight of gathered breath pressing close. Incense curls first, resin thick and bittersweet, threading through the nave like fingers seeking hold. It stings your eyes as you kneel on cold flags that numb your knees, the stone unyielding under wool. The air tastes of wax and prayer, old smoke clinging to rafters, faint honey from bees long gone. Your palms press flat, callous meeting chill, and the low murmur rises around you, voices in rhythm, Latin words tumbling soft but strained, a plea for release that hangs unanswered. You lift your head, gaze tracing the crucifix above the altar, figure twisted, eyes downcast as yours. Figure space along the pews, not crowding now, elbows held apart, faces shadowed by hoods pulled low. A woman nearby bows deeper, fingers twisting a rosary bead until her knuckles whiten, her breath hitching silent. The priest moves at the rail, censer swinging slow, smoke veiling the relics that used to shine with promise. No hand reaches for blessing, no shared hymn lifts the roof. Doubt settles like dust in the beams, heavy in the pauses between amens, where questions whisper, why this house holds empty seats, why the saints stay carved and still. You rise when the rite ends, joints protesting the kneel, and the congregation flows out in thin streams. No embrace at the door, no talk lingering on thresholds. The elder waits at the porch, staff tapping once, his eyes meeting yours with a gravity that shares the unspoken. Refuge here, but faith's forge burns hotter, testing what endures. In that scented hush, where prayer meets the stone's indifference, you feel sanctuary's double edge, not just shelter, but the slow crack of belief under loss. Sometimes resilience is kneeling in the doubt, breathing incense without answers, and leaving the chapel with faith remade, scarred but standing, because the questions keep you reaching higher. The candle gutter out with a hiss, wax pooling cold on the altar cloth, leaving the nave in shadow that swallows the cross's outline. Your knees ache on the prie-dieu, wood worn smooth by hands that sought answers but found only splinters under nails. The air tastes of spent incense, resin turned ash, faint and bitter on your tongue when you swallow against the dryness. No echo of chant lingers. The priest has gone, his robe trailing silent into vestry, leaving you alone with the vaulted quiet. You rise slow, joints protesting the kneel, and pace the aisle, fingers trailing the pew backs, cool oak slick, with years of grip. Faith used to mean certainty here, a voice from the pulpit calling down mercy, community rising in song to fill the stones. Now, the silence presses, a question without form. Why this void when graves multiply, when cries thread the night unanswered? Your chest tightens, breath short, as you kneel again at a side chapel, palms flat to stone floor that chills through your hose. The saint's statue stares blind, paint flaking at the eyes, and you feel the doubt coil like smoke you can't dispel. Figures slip in later, not in fellowship but fragments. A woman at the far pew, head bowed low, fingers tracing invisible signs on her apron. A man by the door, gaze fixed on the empty font, hand hovering as if to dip, then pulling back. No shared prayer binds you. The elder enters last, staff tapping measured, his eyes meeting yours brief, haunted, searching. Before he settles apart, rosary beads clicking soft like bones in a pouch. The space between pulses with unspoken pleas. Where is the hand that parts seas, when this plague devours without halt? You light a fresh taper, flame trembling to life, and watch it steady, the small glow mocking the dark. The weight settles deeper, not anger, but a hollow ache, faith's fire banked to embers under suffering's weight. No thunder answers, no sign breaks the hush. In that vaulted stillness, where pleas rise and dissolve, you feel heaven's quiet as the deepest wound. Not rejection, but absence that tests the soul's root. Sometimes endurance means kneeling without reply, holding the flame when light wanes, and carrying the silence as a scar that shapes belief anew, resilient in its unanswered depth. The low bleat pulls you from the barn door, ragged and off-key, hanging in the still air like a thread about to snap. Your hand touches the latch, iron warm from sun but slick with dew, and the scent hits, sour milk from the cow's flank, mixed with the rank tang of fevered hide. The animal stands lopsided in the stall, eyes dull, milk veins swollen without yield, her side heaving slow. You kneel, palm pressing gentle to her neck, heat rising through wool gloves, pulse fluttering weak under your fingers. The touch lingers, uncomfortable, a warmth that's wrong, seeping into your own skin like question. You lead her out, tether loose to the post, and watch the yard change. Chickens peck listless at scattered grain, no flutter in their wings, feathers matted as if rain never dried. The dog curls in corner, whining soft, nose tucked to paws that shake without play. Wind stirs the hedge, but bees don't hum. The hives sit quiet, wax heavy with unclaimed stores, a faint rot creeping from neglect. Your chest tightens, breath catching the unnatural hush. No birdsong sharp at dawn, no fox cry in twilight, just the cow's drag of hoof on dirt, echoing too loud. Across the furrow a neighbor appears at his fence, face shadowed under cap, eyes on his own ewe that's tipped, legs buckling as she grazes. He lifts a hand, brief, then drops it, turning away slow, shoulders rounded with the same unspoken weight. No call to share the load. You both work alone, pouring water into troughs that ring empty, spreading herbs at feed's edge, in hopes of warding what creeps from field to flesh. The ecosystem frays quiet, wolves boulder in edges, crows gathering thick over untended dead, the balance tipping where hands stay withdrawn. By midday, you secure the cow in shade, her breath hot against your arm as you wrap a damp cloth. The stillness settles deeper, not peace, but a void where life pulsed steady. You step back, wiping sweat that chills quicken breeze, and feel the world hold its unbalanced breath. In that disrupted pulse, where beasts falter and wild edges grow wilder, you sense nature's silent unravel, not apocalypse loud, but a slow shift that mirrors your own guarded steps. Sometimes survival means tending the fevered without cure, watching the web tear, and enduring the hush that teaches resilience in the spaces left empty. The thread of a spider's web catches your wrist first, fine and sticky, trembling in the breeze as you part the underbrush. Dew clings cold to your skin, seeping through sleeve like a reminder of fragility. The air smells alive but off, wet moss and faint animal musk, undercut by the dry crackle of leaves where no feet have trod in days. Your fingers brush bark, rough and shedding in patches, and you taste the sharp green of a leaf chewed for thirst, its juice thinning your saliva to nothing. You move deeper into the wood's edge, basket light on arm, eyes scanning the web of life that's frayed at the seams. The plague pulls humans inward, doors barred, but the world outside unravels its own ways. Bees slow in the hive, wings sluggish from flowers left unpicked, honey stores untouched in empty frames. You lift a comb, wax cracking soft, and see the queen's chamber dim, larvae pale where worker tongues should tend. Your hand hovers, offering a drop of water on a leaf, but the hum doesn't return, the silence a gap where sustenance once flowed. Back by the stream you fish with net dipped careful, water cold shocking your forearms, ripples carrying no minnow flash. A pair of otters, usually bold, slip upstream quick, eyes wary of empty banks where villagers no longer net or trap. The ecosystem leans fragile, foxes bolder, scavenging near the lane, their yips sharp at dusk, birds thicker in untended orchards, pecking cores that rot without hands to harvest. You pull a trout, scales slipping cool in your palm, its fight weak, and release half back, measure taken for the web's sake. A neighbor emerges at her fence, net in hand too, her gaze meeting yours across the furrow, knowing, weary, before she nods once and casts her own line, steps keeping the distance. No shared catch. Children watch from windows, small hands waving at a rabbit that darts too close, the balance tilting as absence feeds the bold. You portion the fish at home, bones sharp under knife, and feel the pull, survival not lone but woven. Your catch relies on stream fed by rain that feeds fields, fields worked by hands spared from fever, hands that now ration to let the wild reclaim. In that delicate tangle, where one skipped meal unravels the next, you sense life's quiet code, not dominion, but dependence. Sometimes endurance is tracing the web's thread, taking only what the circle allows, and mending with measure, understanding the fragile net holds because you honor its weave. Dust chokes your throat first, fine and dry, tasting of sun-baked earth and the faint metallic tang of sweat-soaked leather. The cart jolts over ruts, wheels groaning like weary bones, and your hands grip the reins tight, knuckles whitening where the sun burns through gloves. The air hums with the low buzz of flies drawn to the horse's flank, sweat lathering white foam that stings your eyes when wind shifts. You cough, spit the grit, and urge the beast forward, the road stretching endless under a sky too blue for the weight in your chest. You left at first light, the village shrinking behind, like a dream you can't wake from. Doors barred, faces at windows pale and pleading but turning away. The child's fevered brow lingers in your mind, hot as the brand you avoided pressing. Now, the lane gives way to track, wildflowers nodding mockingly at the edges, their sweetness cloying in the heat. Your companion, a distant kin, rides silent beside, eyes fixed ahead, hand twitching toward the knife at his belt, gaze flicking to shadows in the wood, as if plague hunted on foot. The horse stumbles, leg catching a root, and you pull up sharp, boots hitting ground that shifts loose underfoot. Hot and unyielding. You check the traces, fingers numb despite the sun, and see the road fork, one path straight, the other veering to hills that promise water, but deliver only more dust. Hope pulls you onward, tales of clean air and untouched hamlets fueling the whip's crack. But thirst gnaws deeper, water skin slapping empty against your thigh. A bird wheels high, cries sharp and alone, echoing the emptiness where travelers should meet. Wagons sharing bread, stories passed like coin. Further on, a crossroads waits barren, signposts splintered, pointing to nowhere you've heard. You dismount, knees aching from the saddle, and scan the horizon. Smoke thin from a distant farm, but no figure waves welcome. Your kin nods toward it, hope flickering in his eyes, but you feel the falsehood settle. The road leads not to safety, but circles of the same shadow. You climb back, reins taut, the cart lurching into motion again, dust rising like a veil you can't outrun. In that endless grind of wheel and hoof, where flight promises freedom but delivers thirst, you sense the illusion's bite, not escape in miles, but the body's quiet betrayal. Sometimes survival is chasing the false dawn, tasting dust with every mile, and learning hope's fragility teaches you to turn back when the road reveals its truth. The road's dust cakes your lips, dry and gritty, tasting of parched earth and the faint metallic edge of blood from a cracked canteen bite. Your feet drag through it, boots worn thin, each step sending puffs that sting your eyes and settle in your throat like swallowed regret. The cart behind creaks empty now, wheel groaning over stones that bruise your heels even through leather. Wind whips sharp, carrying a chill that bites deeper than the sun's glare, and you pull your cloak tighter, fingers numb at the ties. You crest the rise and see them first. Figures huddled at the crossroads, cloaks ragged, faces gaunt under hoods pulled low. Not villagers like yours, but strays from hamlets farther out, eyes hollow with the same flight. A woman kneels by a ditch, hand outstretched to a child whose cough hacks wet into the dirt, her gaze flicking up to you, wary, pleading, before dropping back, as if your nearness might steal her last breath. No welcome awaits. A man at the fire's edge stands, hand on a staff that's more crutch than rod, his nod brief and suspicious, blocking the flame you both need. The beyond reveals its cruelty slow, fields untended, crows thick on bloated carcasses by the path, the air heavy with the rot that follows sickness everywhere. You offer a twist of bread from your pack, arm extended full length, but the woman hesitates, eyes tracing your sleeve for the invisible mark, then takes it with a cloth-wrapped hand, retreating quick. No shared meal, no tales swapped over embers. The road forks again, signs splintered, pointing to towns that barred gates long ago. Refugees turned back, or worse. Night falls heavy, stars cold witnesses overhead, and you huddle apart, the fire's warmth a lie. Smoke stings, sparks scattering like false hopes. A cry rises from the group, muffled and animal, pulling you alert, but no one moves to aid. The child's cough echoes yours from home, the same thread weaving despair across borders. You lie back, ground hard under shoulder, and feel the illusion shatter. Flight promised freedom, but delivers only mirrors of the plague's reach. In that nomadic hush, where strangers share space but not trust, you grasp survival's borderless bite. Not walls of stone, but the endless road's rejection. Sometimes resilience is walking the dust alone, offering from scarcity to the wary, and accepting the cruel web extends far beyond home, forging strength in the shared, silent exile. The absence presses first. A silence so thick it hums in your ears like distant thunder that never breaks. Your footsteps echo unnaturally on the packed lane, the crunch of gravel sharp and solitary, swallowed quick by the void. The air tastes stale, of unburnt wood and faded herbs, cool against your skin where sweat beads from the walk. You pause at the well, hand trailing the bucket rope, rough fibers biting palm, but no splash rises. The wind carries nothing. No creak of doors, no low talk from the smithy, no children's chase through the yard. You move on, cloak heavy on shoulders, and the village unfolds empty. Shutters drawn tight like closed eyes, smoke absent from chimneys that stand cold. A dog scratches at a post, whine muffled and alone, paws scraping wood without the bark chase it once knew. Your breath fogs the quiet. Each exhale a small rebellion against the hush, and you press a hand to your chest, feeling the pulse that answers only itself. No hammer rings from the forge. Tools lie where dropped, anvil gathering dust that fine particles your tongue when wind stirs it. At the crossroads, a figure appears. Elder, staff tapping hesitant, eyes scanning the empty square as if willing sound to return. He nods once, slow, hand lifting brief before dropping, the gesture hanging unfinished in the air. No gathering at the church porch, bells stay mute, clapper bound in cloth you helped tie. A woman slips from a doorway, bundle under arm, her gaze averted, steps quick to the hedge where wild roots hide. She glances back, fear etched deep, then vanishes, leaving your footsteps the only rhythm. Dusk falls without warning, shadows lengthening the silence, and you return home, the door bar dropping with a thud that travels too far. The quiet isn't peace, it's a presence, weighing your limbs, turning every breath deliberate. In that enveloping void, where sound's withdrawal reveals the village's fragile pulse, you feel loss's quiet dominion, not chaos of cry or clamor, but the hush that strips the familiar bare. Sometimes endurance is filling the emptiness with your own step, honoring the absent by listening to what remains. and finding resilience in the silence that demands you hear yourself. The echo starts soft, a ghost of laughter in your ear as you stir the pot. Wooden spoon scraping tin that rings too clear in the hush. The broth simmers thin, steam carrying no scent of shared bread or ale spill. Just the bland earth of roots boiled long. Your fingers grip the handle tighter, knuckles paling, and the quiet presses, turning the scrape into a memory. Full tables, voices overlapping, now silence to your breath alone. You pause, hand hovering, tasting the absence on your tongue. Flat, like air gone stale without the warm rush of talk. You step to the threshold, boots scuffing the sill, worn by countless crossings that no longer come. The lane waits empty, weeds pushing through ruts where carts rolled steady, their wheels now a faint recall in your mind, jolting over stones without companions. Your chest aches, not sharp, but persistent, like a pull string unwound. Shadows of what was flicker, children's feet pattering, blacksmith's hammer steady, but fade against the present void, leaving you to fill it with steps that echo back unanswered. At the well, you lower the bucket, rope rough on palms that once shared the hall, water sloshing alone now. A neighbor emerges at her door, bucket in hand too, her eyes meeting yours brief, haunted, distant, before dropping to the ground, movements careful, as if sound might shatter the fragile hold. No shared lift. She draws her water slow, shoulders tense, and retreats, the splash her only farewell. You both linger a beat longer, the silence weaving doubt. Is this caution or loss? The world's quiet a cage or a grave for joy? Evening draws the hush tighter. You bank the coals, flame dying to red pulse, and sit by the empty chair, fingers tracing its arm where a hand used to rest. Memories crowd unbidden. The market's hum, church bells calling, now ghosts in your head, louder than the wind's whisper through cracks. Sleep comes fitful, dreams replaying voices that wake you gasping, the quiet await that settles deeper, mind fraying at the edges where normalcy used to bind. In that persistent void, where echoes of the living past haunt the present still, you feel the psyche's subtle fracture, not breakdown in storm, but erosion by silence's tide. Sometimes resilience is sifting those ghosts, stirring the pot alone, and enduring the mind's quiet unravel, knowing the echoes keep the lost alive within you. The scrape of knife on bark fills the dim cottage, sharp and improvised, wood shavings curling under your blade like reluctant secrets. The air smells of fresh sap and vinegar you boiled from unripe apples, a tangy bite that stings your nose and settles sour on your tongue when you test the edge. Your fingers ache from the unfamiliar hold, the handle wrapped in rags to pad the slip, callus building slow on skin used to finer tools. Despair whispers in the empty forge down the lane, hammers silent, but you push on, carving a new plow tip from oak felled by hand, the grain resisting each stroke until it yields. You step outside, the new blade lashed to your old handle with twisted sinew from a hair you snared, and test it on the field edge. Soil parts grudging but true, clods turning under the makeshift edge, your boots sinking into damp earth that clings cold to ankles. No iron from the smithy means no plowshare, so you adapt, binding the wood with boiled hides stripped from the last calf, the glue tacky and warm against your palms. Sweat beads, mixing with dirt to streak your arms, and the rhythm sets in. Thrust, turn, lift, the soil's resistance, a conversation with your hands. A neighbor appears at the furrow's end, his own tool, a hoe, mended with birch splints and twine from frayed sacks, eyes on your work with a nod that's half admiration, half shared grit. He gestures to his patch, scarred earth, where he hammered nails from a cartwheel to spike the blade, and you both test the yield. Small hills of turned ground, enough for seed if rain holds. No market for tools, no blacksmith's fire, so ingenuity fills the gap. You trade glances over the hemp rope barrier, his hand raising a flask of elderberry mash for ferment, yours offering a scrap of leather punched for lacing. Distance keeps the exchange safe, gestures precise as any bargain. By dusk, your back protests the bend, but the field shows furrows where none stood, the makeshift plow leaning against the barn like a quiet victory. The vinegar tang lingers on your skin, a mark of making from nothing. In that forge of need where hands turn lost to labor, you feel despair's spark igniting craft, not defeat, but the body's clever bend. Sometimes survival is carving the tool from the tree, binding scrap to purpose, and tilling with what remains, discovering resilience grows strongest in the world's withholdings. The soil crumbles cool under your nails as you sift it through a sieve of knotted rags, sifting out stones and weaving from the chaff. The earth smells rich but cautious, damp clay laced with the faint musty tang of last year's decay, turned by your own spade when horses fell to the same quiet fever. Your fingers, dirt-streaked, pinch a kernel of wheat, small and hard-won from the few ears that ripened without reapers' hands. No seed from the miller's bins. They've gone to dust or distant barters. You mix it with nettle seed gathered from roadsides. The green flecks gritty on your tongue when you test the blend, a bitter promise of resilience in scarcity. You kneel in the furrow, the ground yielding soft but reluctant, cold pressing your knees through worn hose. Innovation comes from need, a hollow reed for a pipe, water channeled from the spring without touching lips to tin. You plant in rows spaced wider than before, fingers pressing seed deep, covering with a layer of ash from the hearth to ward the damp that rots what grows. No plow team means small plots, but you mound the soil high, windbreaks of woven brambles at the edges, the thorns pricking your palms as you lash them tight with vine twists. The work pulls steady, back bending in rhythm with the sun's arc, sweat tracing lines down your temple to salt the soil. A neighbor watches from her boundary, hoe balanced, her eyes on your mounds, curious, measuring, before she nods slow and turns to her own patch, mimicking the rays with her own dirt-piled ridges. No shared tools pass hands. She raises a gourd of her fermented bark tea, setting it on a post, and you leave a twist of dried rush for binding in return. Gestures bridge the gap, silent contracts in a world where touch costs too much. By afternoon, your plot takes shape, irregular, but alive with intent, seeds buried like secrets waiting for rain. The wind stirs leaves overhead, a faint rustle that feels like approval, and you stand, wiping earth from your hands, the cold ache in your joints, a badge of the day's yield. In that patient press of finger to soil, where innovation sprouts from empty silos, you feel survival's quiet dare. Not abundance, but the art of coaxing life from lack. Sometimes, endurance is this, blending the wild with the worn, raising mounds against the wind, and trusting small seeds to carry tomorrow, because the body's ingenuity blooms where hope runs thin. The flicker of flame dances erratic on the wall, casting shadows that slink like thieves in the night. Your hand closes around the worn handle of the axe, wood splintered from use, cool and heavy against palm slick with sweat. The air tastes of smoke and damp straw, sharp with the faint, acrid bite of fear that coats your throat. Outside, the wind dies to a whisper, leaving only the crunch of footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the barn where the last grain sits bundled, hidden under false floor. You rise from the pallet, joints stiff in the chill that seeps through cracks, and peer through the shutter's gap. Figures move at the lane's edge, 3 or 4, cloaks ragged but eyes sharp, gleaming in moonlight like crows on carrion. No plague marks them. They're hale, opportunistic, drawn by rumors of weakness. Houses emptied, doors unbarred by sickness. Your breath catches as one approaches the widow's stead, her light faint inside, hand pressing the door bar with tremble you can almost feel. He knocks soft, insistent, voice a murmur you can't catch, but her shadow recoils, pulling the bar tighter, her face pale in the lamp glow, eyes wide, with the knowledge that help won't cross the night. The group fans out, silent predators. One tests a latch down the row, fingers prying gentle but greedy. Another lingers by the well, net cast for offerings left in vain hope of trade. You grip the axe harder, knuckles aching, the weight a promise you hesitate to keep. Confrontation risks the fever's invisible spread, but inaction feeds the shadow. The widow's door holds, but a younger scavenger circles the back, hands slipping toward the hen coop, feathers rustling faint inside. Her child peeks from window, small face frozen, and you step forward, boot-scraping grit that echoes too loud. No call rises from the village. The weak stay hid. Breaths, held in unison. The malice, a new plague that preys on the already broken. You swing the door open a crack, axe ready but low, shadow falling long across the lane. The figures pause, eyes turning, wary, calculating, before melting into dark, footsteps retreating like rats from light. In the night's predatory hush, where shadows feed on vulnerability, you feel malice's cold opportunism, not the fever's blind harvest, but human greed sharpened by despair. Sometimes survival demands this vigil, standing guard in silence, axe heavy with unspoken threat, and guarding the weak not with force, but the unyielding watch that reminds the world of the bonds that endure even in eclipse. The rust of iron bites your palm as you tighten the snare wire, cool coils looping tight around the post, the metal's edge nicking skin, where callus thins from days of grip. Dawn's chill lingers in the air, dew slick on the grass that brushes your knees, carrying the faint earthy scent of turned soil mixed with the distant rot of an unburied beast. Your breath clouds white, steady but watchful, as you scan the lane. Empty now, but shadows from last night's scavengers still etched in your mind. The plague demands distance, but cruelty walks closer, on legs that show no fever. You rise, axe balanced low at your side, and patrol the boundary, steps measured on the damp ground that yields soft underboot. Thorns snag your hem from the hedge you thickened with brambles, a barrier woven hasty from wild growth to ward the greedy who prowl at dusk. A glint catches your eye. Footprints in the mud, fresh, leading to the widow's edge where her coop stands vulnerable. Your jaw sets, pulse quickening, and you follow, hand hovering near the blade that could cut either fever's path or a thief's retreat. At the turn, the elder nods from his post, staff planted deep, eyes sharp under hooded brow as he gestures to the wood's fringe. Two figures skulking, cloaks drawn tight, hands empty but intent clear. No advance. You both hold ground, the silence a pact. Vigilance splits the night, one eye for the invisible pestilence, the other for the flesh and blood wolves that circle weakness. The widow appears at her door, face pale in the light's edge, her hand clutching a wrapped bundle. Herbs, perhaps, or the last egg, before she sets it on the sill and retreats, gaze meeting yours with quiet gratitude that needs no words. Dusk brings the double guard. You light the torch of twisted rush, flame sputtering cold against the wind, casting flickers that dance like warnings. The plague's breath stays at bay with cloth and distance, but human malice tests the wire. A tug here, a shadow there. Your arm aches from the hold, but you stand firm, the post's rough grain grounding you as night deepens. In that dual watch, where threats weave unseen, you feel protection's toll, not just the body's stand, but the soul's unyielding strain. Sometimes survival is this, coiling wire against the prowler, nodding across the hedge to share the load, and bearing the night's price, resilient because vigilance honors both the fever's ghost and the greed that stalks it. The acrid bite of smoke reaches you first, carried on a wind that tastes of charred wood, and the faint, underlying rot of decay long ignored. Your boots crunch over brittle grass at the ridge's edge, the ground dry and unforgiving underfoot, spiking up through thin soles like needles of warning. You pause, hand on the hawthorn branch, thorns pricking palm, and survey the valley beyond, your village a cluster of thatch behind. This new vista a sprawl of hamlets that once traded grain and gossip. The road snakes down, empty of carts that used to rumble with wool and salt, weeds clawing at the ruts where wheels carve deep. You descend, cloak pulled tight against the chill that rises from the hollow, air growing thicker with the smell of abandonment. Mildewed thatch and barrels split by frost, their contents soured to vinegar. A farmstead looms at the bend, door ajar, swinging lazy on hinges that creak mournful in the breeze. No hand to latch it, your steps slow, heart-thudding measured as you peer inside, table overturned, pots scattered, a child's shoe lone in the corner, small and scuffed. Further on, the main path widens to a crossroads, signs weathered blank by rain, pointing to nowhere. Figures appear sparse. A lone traveler hunched over a mule, eyes averted as you pass, hand clutching reins like a lifeline, his cart laden with bundles tied hasty. No greeting crosses. He urges the beast faster, dust rising in his wake, the mule's hooves clipping stones that echo too lone. At the stream, a mill stands silent, wheels stilled in the current, water lapping unchecked where grindstones once hummed. You kneel by the bank, fingers trailing the flow, cold shocking wrists, and see the debris. A cloak snagged on reeds, faded but whole, abandoned mid-flight. The devastation unfolds in glimpses, a field left to crows, their black wheeling mass picking at what cows couldn't claim, an inn's yard choked with unharnessed traces, hay scattered like hasty retreat. No market clamor, no forge clang. The world beyond the veil mirrors yours, but vast, loss scaled to horizons that swallow villages whole. In that expansive hush, where every empty stead echoes the one you guard, you feel the plague's reach, not contained to doors, but a tide sweeping borders clean. Sometimes vigilance widens to this, venturing the road to measure the void, touching the abandoned to honor the scale, and returning with the weight that teaches resilience spans not just home, but the silent fields beyond. The wind shifts bitter as you crest the hill, carrying the faint, pervasive reek of unburied fires, smoke mingled with decay that clings to your cloak like an unwelcome shroud. Your fingers numb on the rein, the leather stiff with frost, and the horse's breath steams white, mirroring your own, each exhale a shared defiance against the chill. Below, the valley sprawls not as patchwork of life, but uniform desolation, hamlets mirroring your own, thatch roofs dark and unmoving, fields left to frost-kissed stubble where no plow has turned in weeks. You urge the mount down, hooves clipping stones that echo too hollow, the road a vein connecting stead to stead in the plague's vast body. No traveler counters your path. Instead, waypoints mark the unseen enemy's claim, a bridge half-sagged, where toll-keepers fled, timbers creaking under your weight alone, crossroads littered with abandoned satchels, bread moldering inside, handles worn from hands that grip too tight. The scope reveals itself gradual. Every rise brings another cluster of homes, shutters nailed shut or gaping empty, smoke absent from chimneys that promised warmth to strangers alike. At a distant crossroads, figures huddle, refugees from upriver, cloaks patched with rags that hint at cities fallen silent, their eyes meeting yours brief across the furrow, universal weariness etched in lines that match your own. A woman leads a mule laden thin, child clinging to her side, both faces gaunt but not marked. She gestures toward a stream, hand waving you off the shared water's edge, the invisible bond of calamity dictating distance even among the spared. No words need pass. The empty road says it. This foe knows no border, striking farm and fortress with equal indifference, weaving all into one frayed tapestry. You skirt a fallen hamlet, the air heavier with the rot of livestock left to bloat in pens, flies buzzing low despite the cold, a reminder that survival threads through every layer, beast, field, and kin alike. The horse falters once, leg brushing a forgotten grave mound at the path's side, simple and overgrown, no name to claim it. Your hand steadies on its neck, feeling the shared tremor, the calamity's reach binding you all in its quiet dominion. In that boundless hush, where every emptied stead echoes the loss at your door, you feel the enemy's true vastness, not a village curse, but a shadow over the world entire. Sometimes endurance is recognizing the web's tier spares no thread, holding your path amid the universal unravel, and finding strength in the knowledge that shared silence forges a common, unspoken resolve. The tick of the notched stick marks another day, its scrape against the lintel faint but insistent, like a pulse you can't ignore. The air hangs heavy, tasting of damp stone, and the faint, stale tang of unwashed cloth. Cool draft slipping under the door to chill your ankles where you sit by the window. Your fingers trace the shutter's grain, wood smooth from endless touch, the world outside blurred to gray through the crack. No cart rumble, no lowing cow, just the wind's hesitant sigh through the thatch. You rise, joints stiff from the hold, and pace the small room, steps measured to avoid the creak that might draw eyes. Waiting is its own fever. Not the hot rush of sickness, but a slow burn in the chest. Breath shallow as if air too might carry threat. The child across the lane whimpers faint through the wall, a sound that pulls you to the sill, hand hovering near the latch but never lifting. No crossing now. The bar stays firm, your palm pressing it once, twice, the iron cold and unyielding. At midday, the elder passes, staff tapping the lane like a metronome for the suspended. His gaze lifts to your window, eyes deep with the same held breath, hand raising in a slow arc before falling, acknowledgement without nearness. You nod back, the gesture a thread in the fray, shared agony in the space between. No church bell calls time. Shadows lengthen without measure. The sun's arc your only clock, each hour stretching thin as the broth you ration from the pot. Night brings the deeper weight, coals glowing low, flame flickering reluctant against the dark that presses close. You bank them careful, ash sifting cool through fingers, and sit in the half-light, mind wandering to harvests past, voices filling the yard. Now, ghosts in the hush. The child's whimper resumes, softer, and you wring a cloth for your own brow, damp with the same unspoken prayer. Hold, just hold, through the limbo where life teeters unclaimed. In that endless pause, where days blur to one held breath, you feel waiting's cruel grace, not resolution, but the agony that forges patience from fear. Sometimes survival is this, marking the stick without advance, nodding across the void to the watchful, and enduring the suspension, resilient, because the weight carves space for what might yet return. The faint glow of dawn seeps through the shutter crack, warm on your cheek like a hesitant promise, cutting the chill that clings to the wall. Your fingers brush the notch in the stick, the wood smooth from daily carve, marking another morning's arrival without fanfare. The air tastes of last night's embers, smoky and faint, mingled with the earthy hint of soil from the potted seed you watered, its tiny root pushing blind against clay. You rise, joints loosening slow, and touch the vial of oil by the hearth, thumb rubbing the cork until the quiet creak reassures. The stores hold, if portioned right. You step to the sill, peering out where the lane stirs minimal. A neighbor passes, basket light on arm, eyes lifting to yours in the brief instant, hope mirrored there, faint but shared, before dropping to the ground. Steps continuing to the wood's edge for what forages offer. No embrace, but her hand raises a sprig of green she found, placing it on the post as token, the leaf's crisp edge brushing your palm when you take it later, a sliver of green against the gray. The gesture lingers, small anchor in the wait, reminder that tomorrow might bud if today endures. Inside, you grind the last barley, stones rough and grinding in your hands, the flour dusting fine and pale, enough for flatbread if stretched thin. The oven pulls warm from coals you saved, heat blooming against your face as you shape the dough, fingers pressing patterns, simple swirls, a child's mark from before the hush. Baking fills the room with subtle yeast, a scent that pulls memory close, full loaves breaking, now this thin circle, but it rises, defiant. You break a piece, the crust cracking soft, taste yielding the nutty bite of persistence, swallowed with water from the rain barrel, cool and pure against your throat. Afternoon brings the bird's return to the eave, its trill hesitant but clear, wings fluttering once before settling, a flicker in the empty yard. You watch from the window, hand on the latch, the sound weaving through the stillness like a thread pulled taut. Night falls, and you light the single wick, flame dancing low, casting light on the notched stick, the green sprig, the bread's remnant, glimmers gathered against the dark. In that subtle weave of small returns, where hope's spark defies the long wait, you feel the soul's quiet hunger, not for grand dawn, but the faintest sign of tomorrow. Sometimes endurance is tending these flickers, marking the root's push, sharing the leaf's green, and breaking the thin bread. Understanding the human need for glimmer sustains when the world hangs suspended, forging tomorrow from today's held breath. The breeze slips through the shutter first, cool and tentative, carrying a hint of wild mint from the hill's edge, clean, almost sweet, chasing away the cloying staleness that's hung for weeks. Your skin prickles under it, the chill raising goose flesh on arms bared by rolled sleeves, a sensation sharp after months of heavy wool and confined heat. You pause at the window, fingers lingering on the latch, rusted iron flaking under thumb, and inhale deep, the fever's sour ghost fading, replaced by this whisper of open air that tastes like rain-washed earth. You push the door wider, steps hesitant on the threshold, boot sole meeting packed dirt that's softened by recent damp. The lane looks different in the light, weeds pushing taller but not wild, a rabbit darting quick across the path, its ears flicking without alarm. No bar holds the world at bay today. You walk farther, the ground yielding cool underfoot, releasing a faint, fresh loam scent that stirs memory of plowing seasons past. Your hand brushes the fence post, wood warm from sun, and the quiet feels lighter, not absence, but a pause ending. At the common, a few figures stir. The elder straightens from his patch, eyes lifting to yours slow, surprise softening his lines, before he nods once, hand gesturing to the sky where clouds part thin. A woman from the end, stead emerges with a basket, her gaze meeting yours across the grass, steps slowing but not stopping, the distance shrinking to arm's length as she sets a knot of herbs on the stump between. You accept it, the leaves dewy and crisp against your palm, a shared breath in the easing hush. No rush of voices yet, but shoulders drop, postures easing from the rigid hold. The wind picks up, rustling leaves that sound like tentative talk, and you follow it to the stream, water running clearer, no scum of neglect on the bank. Kneeling, you cup a handful, cool, shocking your wrists, the taste pure without the fever's shadow. Birds return to branches, calls faint but building, a rhythm breaking the long wait. In that first clean gust, where sickness's trace lifts like mist in sun, you feel change's subtle turn, not triumph, but the world's slow unclench. Sometimes, survival crests here, breathing the new breeze, accepting the herb's touch, and stepping the lane unbarred, resilient, because the heart knows the pause was preparation for this quiet dawn of tomorrow. The first true step outside feels unsteady, your boot testing the lane's packed earth, still cool and yielding from night's dew, a texture forgotten in months of thresholds. The air greets you fresh, laced with the clean bite of turned soil and distant wood smoke, no longer heavy with the fever's lingering pall. Your skin prickles under the breeze, sleeves pushed back for the first time, the sun's touch tentative on your arm, warming without threat. You walk slow, heart measured but lifting, the world unfolding gradual, hedges greening at the edges, a bird's call sharp and unhurried, slicing the hush that once choked every breath. At the common, The elder straightens from his furrow, hoe planted deep, his eyes meeting yours across the grass. Surprise softening to recognition, a nod slow and affirming as he gestures to the patch he's rough-plowed alone. No rush to close the gap. You both move parallel, tools in hand, breaking ground where weeds surrender easy now. Your spade bites true, soil parting with a soft tear, releasing worms that twist blind to light, life stirring beneath where death held sway. A woman joins at the field's rim, her basket swinging light, seeds spilling from pouch to palm. She scatters them wide, gaze flicking to yours brief, a shared exhale in the rhythm of her arm's arc. The recovery dawns fragile. You mend the fence with fresh-cut stakes, lash binding tight without nails, wood rough but holding. She waters the new furrows from a shared pail, set midway so hands meet water but not flesh. Children peek from doorways, steps hesitant at first, one kicking a stone that rolls to a stop, the sound pulling faint smiles, plays echo, testing the air's safety. No gatherings yet, but the bell in the steeple clangs once, faint and experimental, answered by a low murmur from the porch, where figures space along the rail. By midday, your back aches from the bend, but the plot shows lines of promise. Earth turned, seeds bedded, the sun climbing higher without shadow. You pause, wiping sweat that beads clear, no fever's heat behind it, and feel the dawn's edge. Not full light, but the fragile shift where steps forward reclaim what's lost. In that cautious reclaiming, where each furrow honors the held breath, you sense recovery's tender weave, not victory bold, but the body's slow trust in the sun's return. Sometimes endurance crescendos here, scattering the seed with wary hands, nodding across the shared soil, and walking the lane unbarred, resilient because the fragile dawn teaches the heart to step again, one measured breath at a time. The weight of the beam settles heavy in your arms as you lever it from the collapsed wall, timber rough and splintered against palms already scarred from the lift. Dust rises in clouds, tasting gritty and old on your tongue, laced with the musty rot of timbers left to weather unchecked. Your muscles burn, back arching under the strain, sweat tracing lines through the grime that cakes your skin. But you haul it aside, the thud echoing across the yard where weeds choke what was once a garden. The air stirs faint, carrying no fever's tang now, just the clean bite of earth turned fresh by recent rain. You straighten, wiping your brow with a forearm, and survey the rubble. Stones from the smithy's forge scattered like forgotten bones. Thatch matted with the remnants of lives paused too long. No hands join yours yet. The village rebuilds in fragments, each claim a solitary push. Your shovel bites the ground, turning soil loose and loamy, cool clods yielding to the blade as you clear the plot, old roots twisting free, their ends pale and reluctant. The field beyond calls, furrows waiting to be reclaimed, and you drive the edge deeper, rhythm building. Dig, turn, smooth. The earths give a small mercy after months of unyielding weight. A neighbor appears at the boundary hedge, his own barrow piled with debris from a shed's ruin, face lined but steady as he dumps the load and pauses. Gaze on your cleared patch. He nods slow, hand gesturing to a spare spade leaning against his wall, an offer made without words. You shake your head gentle, pointing to the row you've started, and he mirrors your arc with his own tool, both of you spacing along the line, furrows aligning like cautious steps toward common ground. No touch passes the gap, but shoulders ease, the shared labor a silent vow. By midday, your plot emerges, rubble pushed to edges, soil raked even, seeds from scant pouches scattered careful. The sun warms your neck, no longer a threat but ally, and you press a hand to the turned earth, feeling its subtle pulse beneath. In that deliberate reclaiming, where hands wrestle ruin back to root, you sense survival's quiet rebirth, not instant bloom, but the body's patient forge. Sometimes endurance manifests here, heaving the beam, furrowing the field alone yet aligned, and tasting dust turned to earth, resilient, because the rebuild honors the lost by making space for what grows anew. The warmth of the shared fire draws you closer, embers crackling soft as you add a split log, the heat blooming against your chilled fingers still rough from the morning's till. The air carries the subtle smoke of damp wood, mingling with the faint, nutty aroma of stew bubbling in a communal pot. Roots, and a scant bird from the wood, portioned even among the hands that stir. No feast of old, but this circle on the common, spaced along the log benches, feels like mended cloth, threads rewoven tighter, careful of the gaps where some sit empty. You carve a spoon from hawthorn, passing it to the woman at your side, her eyes meeting yours steady. Gratitude in the nod as she takes it, her own knife pausing mid-sharpen. The bonds reshape here, not in the crowded yard of before, but in deliberate nearness. The elder divides the broth with a ladle etched from bone, his gaze lingering on each face before pouring, measures of trust earned through the shared hold. No embrace crosses arms. Instead, gestures build the weave. A neighbor offers a twist of twine from her basket, holding it out palm up, and you loop it around your plow handle in return, the fiber biting gentle into wood, binding tool and task. Afternoon turns to tending. You all move to the field edge, hose rising and falling in loose rhythm, soil yielding richer under collective turn. A child darts between rows, scattering seed from a pouch held by his mother, his small hand brushing yours accidental but unpulled, the touch fleeting, a bridge of innocence in the aftermath. Faces lighten gradual, shoulders dropping as the furrows align, looks exchanged over the hedge, subtle approvals that speak of resilience forged in isolation now threading back. Dusk settles, the fire rebuilt higher, shadows dancing less ominous. You sit again, spoon in hand, the stew warming your core, its simple depth a testament to what's remade. In that cautious circle, where fire and furrow knit the frayed, you feel the fabric's quiet reform, not the old weave, but one tempered by loss. Sometimes survival renews here, passing the carve without fear, nodding across the shared soil, and tasting the stew together, resilient, because the bonds, though reshaped, prove stronger for the scars they bear. The chill of the abandoned loom seeps into your fingers as you trace its frame, wood warped and dusty from disuse, the shuttle hanging limp like a forgotten promise. The air tastes stale, of oiled wool gone musty, and your skin crawls with the ghost touch of threads you once wove beside her. Hands flying steady, laughter threading the rhythm. Now the silence amplifies every creak of the floor, a low groan under your step that echoes the empty chairs in the yard, where voices used to rise with the dawn. You sit, picking up the shuttle, its weight heavier than before, fibers course against your palm as you loop a scrap of yarn. Poor stuff from nettles, but it binds. Guilt coils in your gut, tight as the knot you tie. Why your breath continues when hers stopped at the threshold, bar dropped too late. Memories flicker unbidden, the cough that pulled her low, your hand hovering but never crossing, the bar's cold iron sealing the choice. You rise, pacing the dim room, boots scuffing rushes that crunch hollow, each step dragging the weight of faces vanished. The baker's wife at market, eyes bright before the fever dimmed them, the child who waved from the hedge, gone to a mound unmarked. Outside, the elder passes the window, his gaze lifting slow, haunted, mirroring yours, hand clenching the staff as if to steady the unseen load. He pauses, finger touching his chest where a locket hangs, eyes dropping to the grave dirt still caked in the treads of his boot, then moves on, shoulders bowed under the same unspoken burden. No words bridge the gap, a nod suffices, shared trauma in the averted look that says we carry what can't be named. Night falls, and you mend a cloak by candle, needle pricking sharp through cloth, blood beading on thumb, a small wound that stings like accusation. The ghosts gather in the flicker, faces in the weave, guilt's whisper louder than wind through cracks. In that heavy hush, where survival's gift twists to burden, you feel trauma's quiet anchor, not voiced in cries, but etched in every hesitant step and averted gaze. Sometimes resilience bears this weight, threading the nettles without her hands, nodding to the elder's shadow, and mending the cloak alone, understanding the human heart endures by holding the ghosts close, their silent company the price of breath reclaimed. The bone handle of the hoe feels worn smooth in your grip, carved from antler when iron grew scarce, its weight a familiar ache in your shoulders as you drive it into the soil. The earth yields today with a soft, giving crunch, releasing a fresh, loamy scent that's new after months of barren digs, no longer the reluctant clod of fear-tilled ground, but soil alive with the subtle pulse of worms and hidden roots. Your hands, scarred from hasty mends and endless turns, press deeper, callous meeting the cool dampness that seeps through cracks, a reminder etched deep. What the catastrophe taught was not just survival, but the earth's quiet demand for care unhurried. You straighten, wiping sweat that beads despite the morning chill, and see the field reshape under shared effort. The elder hauls a barrow of composted leaves from his plot, his steps slower but sure, eyes on the horizon where clouds gather without threat. He tips the load at your row's end, a nod tipping his hat brim, subtle approval of the wheel you rigged from cart remnants, turning the heavy barrow with less strain. No need for words. The wisdom runs bone deep now. Learn it in the lean. Waste nothing. Mend what breaks. Let the land teach its pace. A woman from the next stead joins, her rake pulling weeds with deliberate strokes, face lined but lifted as she pauses to bind a loose furrow edge with twine from her apron. Her glance meets yours. Shared knowledge in the way she chooses the strongest stalk to anchor. The day unfolds in this measured dance. You reroute a trickle from the spring, digging a shallow ditch that catches the flow, water gurgling cool over stones you placed by hand, nourishing the seedbed without flood. The hoe rises and falls, rhythm syncing with the wind's low hum through the hedges, and memories surface unbidden. The bar dropped on a cough, the ration held back too long. But now they sharpen the stroke, turning loss to lesson. Brevity hones the hand, absence values the yield. The elder pauses nearby, planting his staff to rest, his fingers tracing a scar on the wood that matches one on his knuckle, catastrophe's mark, worn to wisdom. By evening, the furrows stand ready, earth padded firm, and you lean on the hoe, breath steady, the soil's faint mineral tang on your lips from a wiped hand. In that patient turn of earth and memory, where hands bear the catastrophe's etchings, you feel wisdom's profound quiet, not preached, but lived in every deliberate dig and shared nod. Sometimes resilience roots here, choosing the strong stalk to bind, rerouting the trickle with scarred fingers, and letting the lands give. Teach the heart that survival's true gift is the lesson carved deep, guiding tomorrow with the weight of what was endured. The crunch of unfamiliar footsteps on the lane pulls your gaze, boots heavier than the village's old rhythm, carrying the scent of distant roads, leather oil and wild herbs, foreign to the earth here. Your hand pauses on the gatepost, wood warm from afternoon sun but splintered, where vines crept unchecked during the lean. The figure approaches slow. A young man, not from these hedgerows, his eyes scanning the thatch roofs with a mix of hunger and wariness, sack slung over shoulder light with what he's carried from farther afield. The landscape has shifted without you willing it, fewer hands at the plow, steadsteads standing empty, their doors nailed shut like sealed memories, weeds claiming yards where children once kicked stones. You nod, brief, and he mirrors it, hand gesturing to the edge of the common, where the elder directs a small group. The baker's widow now tends the kiln, her movements sure as she kneads dough from scant grain, face lined deeper but commanding the space the lost left behind. No hierarchy of old, roles reshuffle quiet. The miller's son, spared and widowed young, hauls water from the stream, his shoulders broader from the load, gaze lifting to yours in passing, a tilt of chin that says the work divides anew among the breathing. The village feels lighter, airier, the silence broken by these new echoes, a laugh faint from the well, where two from upriver share a pail, water splashing cooler than before. At the field, you turn the soil with the group, spade biting deeper now that hands are fewer but firmer in purpose, new arrivals tilling beside the old, their rhythms sinking gradual, soil yielding richer under the shared press. The elder pauses, wiping his brow, his look encompassing the thinned ranks. No more the crowd at harvest, but a core tempered, each furrow a boundary redrawn. The young man joins at the row's end, his spade striking true after watching yours, the earth parting smooth, a subtle alliance in the turn. Dusk paints the changed vista gold, houses fewer but standing taller, the absences a shadow that shapes the light. In that reshaped terrain, where ghosts thin the ranks but strength fills the gaps, you feel the calamity's quiet legacy, not erasure, but evolution of the line. Sometimes survival remakes the map, nodding to the stranger's step, tilling with hands once foreign, and walking the lane lighter, resilient, because new beginnings carve from the old losses, turning demographic scars to soil that yields a steadier tomorrow. The golden heads of wheat brush your thighs as you swing the sickle, blade whispering through stalks that yield with a dry snap, filling your arms with bundles warm from the sun. The air hums with the faint, sweet dust of harvest, grain's earthy release, no longer choked by the old rot. And your hands, steady now, tie the sheaves with twists of reed, fibers coarse but forgiving against callus earned in leaner turns. Sweat traces your brow, salty on lips when you pause to sip from the gourd, water cool and clear from the spring that runs freer these years, its flow a quiet testament to the hands that rerouted it without fail. You stack the sheaves in the cart, wheels creaking under the load that's fuller than last season. The horses snort a low affirmation as it stamps the ground, hooves sinking into soil that's richer for the rest it claimed. The field stretches, dotted with figures moving in parallel. The elder binds his row with deliberate knots, his gaze lifting to yours across the furrows, pride softened in his eyes, a nod slow and deep that carries the weight of winters weathered together. No frenzy of old crowds. This harvest is measured, the thinned ranks working wider plots with tools mended from scrap, resilience woven into every stroke. A newcomer from the valley joins at the edge, his sickle flashing in rhythm with yours after weeks of watching, shoulders sinking as he pauses to offer a handful of wild oats from his patch, palm extended steady. You take them, adding to your load, the exchange a thread in the enduring weave. No barriers now, just the shared bend to the task. Children trail the cart's path, gathering stray heads in aprons, their laughter light but earned, a sound that fills the air without crowding it. The elder straightens, wiping his hands on his tunic, his look encompassing the field. Fewer backs, but each stronger, the land giving back what was asked in careful measure. By dusk, the stacks rise humble but true, the cart groaning homeward under the sky's fading gold, and you linger on the rise, sheaves fragrant under your arm. In that steady swing of blade and bind, where fields return what endurance sowed, you feel life's spirit unyielding, not defiant roar, but the quiet pulse that outlasts the odds. Sometimes resilience is this legacy, harvesting the fuller yield with scarred hands, nodding across the furrows to the spared and the new, and carrying the sheaves home, knowing the human will endures not despite the catastrophe, but through its forge, blooming in the soil it helped to till.